If you're looking for a great way to monetize your podcast and add a lot of additional value to a subset of your podcast audience, there's probably no better way than paid podcast subscriptions. And instead of going with a platform that owns all of your data and takes a big percentage of your revenue, own your platform, own the kind of destiny of your podcast and its monetization with Castos and our integration with industry leading payment platform Stripe. In this video, I'm going to share how to create a private podcast, connect it to Stripe so you can accept payments, and then automate the process of new customers paying you money for your private podcast and then being added as private podcast subscribers in Castos so they can get that premium content automatically directly from you every time you publish an episode. Let's dive in. Here in our Castos dashboard, we are going to first create a new podcast. We're going to make it private. We're going to authorize Castos to connect and communicate with our Stripe account. Stripe is a very popular kind of payment processor that allows you to accept credit card payments from folks online. They power most of the credit card transactions that you do and you see online. Probably everyone except for Amazon uses Stripe. And then we're going to connect the two logic to say when somebody pays me for this particular product in Stripe, add them as a private subscriber to my private podcast so they get this exclusive content automatically every time, day, night, 24/7. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to manage anybody, right? Okay, so here in the Castos dashboard, we're first going to create a new podcast. We're going to give it a title and a description. Next, we'll upload a cover image. I created this in Dynamo, our free podcast cover image creator and editor tool. So dynamo.castos.com if you want to check that out. And this website is generated automatically for you. We'll see that later on. We don't need a category because this is going to be a private podcast. So we'll click next. Castos offers entirely free podcast transcripts for all of your episodes. You can leave this on if you want. I'm going to turn it off just because this is a demo video, but I would encourage you to leave it on. Podcast transcripts are really great for accessibility. They'll tie into chapters and automated show notes and things like that later on within the Castos platform, so you probably want to leave that on. Great, this gives me a little preview of what this looks like, and I'm going to say, create my podcast. Great, so we've just created a podcast within the platform. Now what we're going to do is say, hey, do we need to make this podcast private, or do we want to look at monetizing it with something like Castos Ads or Castos Commerce? We're going to first make the podcast private, and then we're going to connect Stripe and then have those two talk to automate the process of adding and removing private subscribers as they pay for certain products in Stripe. Cool. So let's come to manage visibility here. And I'll say this podcast is private. Great. So the podcast is private. It cannot be submitted to Apple Podcasts. It is totally locked down, and only people who you invite to access this content are going to be able to see it. Okay. And that's where the Castos mobile app really comes in. Okay, so now we want to connect our Stripe account, and Stripe accounts are entirely free. If you don't have one already, if you're not making money online, you can go create one, stripe.com, just register for free. They'll ask you information about yourself and where you live, bank account, and probably need identification and things like that. And then I'm already logged in over here in another tab. We'll go into the settings here, into integrations. I'll select Stripe from the left side, and I'll say connect with Stripe. So this is kind of going out to Stripe. This is my Stripe account here, and I'll say connect. Great. So now Stripe account connected to Castos. I get the green light here. That's great. Now I need to tell Castos, hey, when somebody pays for a particular product in Stripe, add them as a private subscriber. And if I go over to my Stripe account here, you see I have a couple of products. Imagine a product in the e-commerce sense, like a pair of socks or a subscription or something like that. I've created these two products here. And if you haven't created one yet, you can just come here and say create and fill in the details here. You'll want to make sure that it is some sort of a recurring product, so it's monthly or annually. I've already done that. If you haven't already, just go ahead and create those here, and you'll see them listed. And this one's $8 a month, and this one's $10 a month. We'll go back into the Castos dashboard and go to the automations tab at the top navigation and set up this kind of if this, then that automation between Stripe and Castos and our private podcast. And so we'll say, I want to create a new automation. So what is the triggering event? What is the beginning of this? It's when Stripe has a subscription created for this product. And you see I have the two products that I had listed in my Stripe. I'll select this one. And what should happen then? So Castos should add someone to a podcast. And the podcast, the only podcast I have in my account that's private is listed here, my ultra secret podcast. So what we're saying is when somebody buys Craig's secret podcast product in Stripe, they get added as a private subscriber here. Great. And I'll say save. That's great. Okay, so we want to activate this now. And then we want to do the opposite, which is when somebody cancels in Stripe, that they're removed as a private subscriber because I don't want them to keep getting the value of my private podcast if they're not paying. So I'll do the same here. Stripe subscription ended, right? So somebody stops paying, whether they cancel or whatever, to that same product, right? Then Castos should remove this person from my podcast. And this, again, is the only private podcast I have, so it's listed here. And I'll say save. Great. Okay, so we have subscription created to this product and subscription ended, removed from podcast. I'll activate the second one and we're set to go. Great. So now literally everything is done, right? So all you need is, if I go back to my Stripe account, I have, this is the product that we said that would grant folks access to my private podcast. So within the details of our product here, Craig's Secret Podcast product, which is $10 a month, we have this price at $10 a month. And if we click the three little buttons here, we can say view payment link. And this is the URL that folks would go to pay. So if we copy this and just put it in a new tab in our browser, we see a checkout page. We say, hey, subscribe to Craig's Secret Podcast. It's $10 a month. It has the name of my company up here. And it lets folks pay, credit card, Apple Pay, Cash Pay, whatever. If they use Stripe a lot, they might be already kind of authenticated. But this is how someone would pay. So this is the checkout experience with Castos Stripe automation. Somebody pays here and they get redirected to a thank you page, right? And this is everything. This is all that it takes to connect Stripe to your Castos account so that if somebody pays you money for a particular product, this $10 product in this case, that they will be added as private subscribers to your podcast. And you can see that logic happening here. And the way you would see folks who have paid you is here in your private subscriber dashboard. So you could manually add people every time that somebody pays you, or you just automate this. And it's the beauty of automation, right? Is we take care of all of the kind of heavy lifting and busy work, right, for you. So you can go focus on creating content, growing your brand, making money, and being successful as a podcaster. So you would see folks who have paid in these products up here in your private subscriber dashboard. You also would see them in your Stripe dashboard if they've paid you money. So this is how you can create a connection between Stripe and Castos so that when folks pay you money for particular products, they're added or removed automatically as private subscribers to your private podcast. With this payment link, you also could put this on a website. So say you have a website, whether it's a Castos website or WordPress or Squarespace or something like that. This is just a link and it goes out to a beautiful looking checkout page like this, which is pretty kind of agnostic. You don't want a payment page to have a bunch of fancy stuff on it. You just want folks to focus on paying. And so you just use this to open in a new tab or something from your website or from a social media bio or something like that. This is all you need, is just this link right here. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that walkthrough of how Castos and Stripe can automate the process of you offering a paid private podcast to a select subset of your audience. I think, to me, this is hands down the best way to monetize a podcast, especially if you have a small audience. You only need handfuls of people to make really meaningful money. They're paying you $10 or $20 a month. If I was a small creator, and I am in a lot of ways, and I wanted to monetize my podcast, I wouldn't go dynamic ads. I probably wouldn't even go selling ads directly to people. I would monetize it with premium content to a subset of my audience who I know wants a little more from me than they get every week in my regular podcast. And so I would create a little bit of extra content and sell this through a private podcast. And it's really important for me to own the platform that my content is distributed and monetized through, which is why I wouldn't go through a platform like Patreon, and really why we built this private podcast and Stripe functionality and the automations engine that connects those two right into the Castos platform. So I hope you enjoy this. Any questions, drop a comment in below or send us a message, hello@castos.com.